Record. All right, I'm gonna record a video. So, this is an interesting topic that comes up, and might as well just make a Tafo talk on it. So, fiction's tweet. I think it's funny because when you talk to fiction in real life, and you read the tone, or you infer the tone of his persona online, it's too different. I think the way that fiction portrays himself in person is a lot more jovial, kind of in a joking kind of way. It's like, but I think on Twitter it doesn't really translate the kind of sarcasm, the humor, and all of this, and nuance gets lost. So, fiction's tweet, just for you guys, I'm gonna pop this up. If the Melee community at large cared about actual analytical content, I would have made so much sick stuff by now. Honestly, just so hard to get motivated to do it when top player uses low tier and top player consumes hot sauce, etc., are just 1 million times more appreciated. And then he adds, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to include top player watches video of another top player consuming hot sauce and talks over it. You all apparently can't get enough of that." Well, I can't get enough of that either. So it's an interesting topic. It's definitely something I struggled with when I first created Melee content back in 2014, 2015. Obviously, like things like tier list discussions and kind of things that are more servicey do get a lot more traction. And I remember when it was just a kind of to my mistake and lack of understanding, because keep in mind, like, people like fiction, myself, are very old school, so we grinded out Melee. When Brawl came out, it was 08, 09, so there were very few of us, and a lot of us were just very passionate, right? So you could say that the majority of people who played Melee were also extremely hardcore. For example, in brackets, you would play ranked player in round one of winners, and then play maybe some random person, and immediately in losers you'd play a top 10 player in SoCal. That's how concentrated the scene was back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And then we progress forward. The documentary comes out, really popular, and then all of a sudden we're getting thousands of people entering events, and more so, we're having hundreds of thousands of people watch the big tournaments. And overall, like, the couple of things that come out of this is, right, there is going to be a segmented audience. There are going to be the players that are really hardcore about the game, they want to dissect the game, and there's an audience for that, right? But beyond that, as Melee grows, there's going to be a ton of people who are just interested in watching the biggest tournaments. A lot of my friends from League of Legends, other FGC groups and whatnot, or people who are from Counter Strike. There's a lot of people I've met over the years who will watch Evo, who will watch Genesis, right? Because they enjoy the narratives of the players. They think it's cool to watch, but in terms of dissecting the game and getting into all the nitty gritties, they're not really that interested in that. So overall, um, the circle of people who, who play Melee casually, enjoy it, as a kind of pastime, it's going to be like this big. And the people who want to, like, grind the game out, it's going to be a lot much of a smaller circle. So this kind of content piece, I understand where fiction's coming from, because when I first started creating content creation, I really wanted to dissect the game, give high level analysis. Zach Lowe from NBA writing was one of my heroes in terms of writing for sports, and I thought that content will hit really well. But it's my stuff that was a little bit more memey, my top 100 list that actually hit 10, 20, 50, 100 times bigger than my in-depth stuff. And my in-depth stuff, the in-depth stuff, it kind of hurts in a way if you're in that position to try to create content, because that in-depth stuff, by definition, is going to take a lot more to really create, because you're going to have to make sure everything is exactly right. It's a really big deep dive into a really nuanced topic that you want to get into, whereas opposed to just creating this, like, fun interview, it actually does take a lot less work overall. So it's one of those things where the amount of effort doesn't equate to the amount of viewership that you're going to get, despite the fact that it is highly researched content. um However, but that was one of the things early on when I created Melee content that I just had to kind of accept that Mango telling a story about being at Dunk's house and how they were drunk was going to be 100 times more exciting to the average viewer than me dissecting a really small interaction. Now, I will say this though: there is an audience for deep analytical content. When we talk about controllers and whatnot, it just has to be done creatively and in a very smart way. So when TAS does content on like a really nuanced interaction where he talks about, could SUJ have survived the ceiling glitch against the Luigi bait at Big House. That content was really interesting, right? Because it talks about like the options that Mango could have done to, or not Mango, Johnny could have done to survive that situation, and how could different situations play out. And to me, that is analytical content. Um, and so I think it's reasonable to say that there are a lot of people in the community that are creating analytical pieces, or these really niche kind of stories based on a very specific interaction, practical TES, melee stats, awesome sauce, um, SSBM tutorials that have all done analytical content. And granted, it's not going to be as popular as Hungry Box's Hot Ones, or the eating hot sauce, or Mango telling a funny story on the Scar and Toph show back in the day. But realistically, I think why a lot of people follow the community is for the players, the personalities, their stories, right? And and that's just the reality of a lot of things and why things are attractive. And that's why in a lot of other scenes, they really want to highlight the players and the personalities that make the game more than the game itself. It's not to say that the game itself isn't important, but people are more interested in the stories of the players and the community more than the game. And I think the documentary highlighted it pretty well, where why it's so popular is because it created a narrative around 7 to 8 players, and then at the end it talked about why the community was so great. Now Melee was a vehicle in this, and it does create this narrative pillar for people to come together, right? But at the end of the day, when people watch the documentary and they have fond memories of the original documentary, it's the players that they talk about. Isaiah, Ken, PC, Korean DJ, like all these players. That's what the community latches onto. So that's just to me just really natural in terms of what people care about. When I look at other games myself, I care more about the players and the storylines more than the gameplay itself. Even though I do consume a lot of high level gameplay, that's always going to be a little bit more interesting to me. But I will say this, and to end it, to add to my previous point of analytical content, it just has to be like, I can't talk about something that like no one really cares about. So when you pick something in the gameplay space, I think there is a lot of room for people to do well in it. And just the practical TS moment with SUJ and Abate is a good example. Also Mango versus Hacks at Pound, where Mango upbeat. I think practical TES showed a bunch of possibilities of how Mango could have recovered, and I think a lot of people at least consumed that clip on Twitter. There's the Peach record, there's the break the targets, people trying to break the record and get frames. And I think you just need to be able to frame it correctly in a way that people are going to be excited to really watch and consume it. So this can go with thumbnails, titling, all the little marketing aspects of making a video on YouTube popular are still apply here. Just because you go for analytical stuff doesn't mean that there's still an element of marketing that needs to come into play. Like Sumner's Salt is a phenomenal example of what I view as a narrative and an analytical piece in terms of what can capture an audience, right? Because like Somersault does share the story and the progression of a game and how fascinating it is to be a part of this deep dive. But along the way, he talks about a lot of really technical specific things that the players have to do. And the analytical side of things only is used to further highlight how special these players are. But the analytical piece is also a vehicle to create this entertaining, grasping thing that people will latch onto. All in all, my short summary is, at the end of the day, people are going to be more attracted to personalities and players and, people and community. And gameplay itself in pretty much anything is going to be largely secondary. But with that being said, there is an audience that is truly waiting to be captivated by analytical content, and it just really needs to be marketed and thumbnailed and all that YouTube algorithm stuff like done well. But I think there are still a ton of stories that could be told where the technical aspects of Melee or the specific interactions can be the primary driver of the content itself.